It seemed like a bit like, okay, we have this really cool idea for an opening, and then then there has to be a monster somewhere because it's a horror movie. And that's kind of how it came across as. So I'm really curious, did we miss something about that? Like, does it, like, I can make a connection, right, where in part 2, AJ is clearly a predator, right? And then the father, what was his name, Frank, right? We like also kind of try to control and abuse his daughter and his wife, and we're kind of seeing the aftermath of that. So there are parallels there, but I'm not sure that's enough to really have a story that really hangs together.
I understand you guys' points. I think part 3 was showing the consequence of the message that was trying to be portrayed. And I think the main message that was trying to be portrayed was a film that tried to pretty much encourage women to pretty much stop ignoring red flags.
Yep.
And I think that's a current situation, not even a current situation, it's always been like that. I think like a lot of women, what they do, they kind of like ignore their intuitions. Like, for example, right, there was a scene with Jess, right? There's many times where, like, just throughout the movie, she's hesitant about something because her intuition is telling her, okay, danger, but she still proceeds by going to the danger. For example, when she discovers the door, right, the basement, she looks at it and she goes, no. I was like, okay, I think when she said no, I thought like that's like a representation of intuition. I might be looking into it, but it is what it is. But then she proceeds after like 4, she kind of like rationalizes and then proceeds to go to the danger, especially with part 3, right? I understand it's very like for me, I was thinking to myself, like, how the hell does this relate to the first 2 parts? But there's scenes, for example, like I think with AJ, I think it relates to him because it's kind of like foreshadowing his future in an exaggerated way, as in like your predatory ways can lead you to some sick stuff like this. Of course, not necessarily him, doing bad things to his daughters, but it could lead you into such a dark path like this guy. And also with Jess, pretty much she's in a situation due to her not trusting her intuition. So I think that was the main message at hand. The makers behind this movie, obviously, there's different themes. Now, they may not like entwine perfectly, but the message behind it was conveyed in a very, for me, different way to other horror movies in general.
So the thing about ignoring red flags, right? Like, I watched this on Amazon, and every time I moved the mouse, these little hints and background information popped up, and it was there as well. And that, I think that is clearly in parts 1 and 2, where basically essentially Tess has to make decisions on who to trust and who not to trust, right? And she always gets it wrong, right? She's mistrustful of Keith, but he turns out to be a decent guy, and she trusts AJ, and he turns out to be a monster. And she trusts in the police, and they're completely useless and completely dismissive of anything she has to say. And she's afraid of Andre, right? The homeless guy, but he turns out to be well-intentioned and just wants to help people, right? Because he knows what's been going on in that house, and he knows how to stay safe. So I see the idea, right? My thing is just, number one, shouldn't the movie have taken that somewhere, and in a way that ties into who and what the monster is? Like, I can see the idea of trust a little bit, because like the wife presumably trusted her husband, and then he turned out to be the monster, and then she found herself locked in her basement, and presumably like just spent the rest of her life there, probably. So she trusted the wrong person as well. So I guess I kind of see it.
Yeah.
But I guess I was kind of looking for some way to connect the monster to the theme, right? Where often in monster movies, the monster is kind of the theme made personal, right? In some way. It doesn't have to be completely literal, but something like that often happens. And I kept looking for that here, and I just didn't find it really. Other than that, you're supposed to trust your family, and the monster is the result of family gone bad, essentially. Just not sure that's enough to carry the movie.
I see what you're saying, but when you say carry the film, for example, part 1 and already the first 2 parts link already, right? So that's like half of the film. Well, that's technically more than half of the movie. Mm-hmm. So for you, you're saying that the third act killed it for you. But before that, like Act 1 and Act 2, it was enough for you to say, okay, this was actually a good movie. So why for Act 3 was it so bad? Was it because obviously that reason that you just provided right now? So you're saying that reason alone is what pretty much made the film capitulate?
I just didn't find the punchline, just so to speak. Like, I didn't find what the ending had to do with the message of the film.
I see.
Which has to do with trust and trusting the wrong person and ignoring warning signs. I can imagine how to do that. but I just didn't really see the movie doing that or trying very hard. And I've also seen other horror movies where they have a good idea for a beginning, and then in the end they just put in a monster to finish the movie, right? Cobweb was the same way earlier this year or last year, where the first half is this really well done family drama about these controlling helicopter parents, right? And then in the second half, there's a monster in the walls, and also a monster in the walls, and they kind of just need to defeat it or fight it. And this seemed a bit similar, where once the monster showed up, this movie stopped being about something.
Yeah.
When in the first half, it very clearly tries to, and it's kind of really obvious how, say, Keith and AJ orbit the same thematic space, right? But then that kind of just stops in the end. And I think that's really the part where the movie kind of lost me.